So if you've ever found yourself staring at the ceiling wondering, what's the point of all this stay with me? You're not broken. You're not behind. You're on the threshold of transformation. In this channel, we don't speak to the algorithm, we speak to the soul. If that speaks to you, take a moment to subscribe so you don't miss the deeper journey. Drop a comment below and share the moment when you first felt the world didn't quite fit. And if this message stirs something within you, share it. Because you're not alone. More and more people are waking up slowly but surely and remembering that life was never meant to be a performance. It was meant to be lived fully and truthfully. In a world engineered for speed and spectacle, the individual quietly withers. You may not notice it at first. It begins subtly in the moments between obligations, in the strange emotional flatness that creeps into your mornings, in the pressure to keep up, perform, produce. We scroll through lives not our own, compare our insides to others' outsides, and absorb messages that tell us who we should be. But beneath all this stimulation, something essential is slowly being lost. Carl Jung observed this phenomenon long before the age of screens. He called it the tragedy of modern man that he is too often outwardly successful and inwardly bankrupt. While the world applauds productivity and appearance, the soul, the deepest and most human part of us, goes neglected. And like a plant denied sunlight, it begins to shrink quietly, withdrawing into the unconscious. The modern condition, Jung believed, is not merely one of distraction, but of disconnection. The disconnection from meaning, from inner truth, from the timeless aspects of the psyche. And the cost is spiritual. Many people today live what Jung described as a life of mere routine, wherein they perform their roles but feel hollow within. They are not living, they are surviving. They are not becoming, they are imitating. We are told to be more, but rarely are we asked to become ourselves. This is where Jung draws a profound distinction between persona and self. The persona is the mask we present to the world. It is the well-edited version of us that says the right things, performs the right tasks, and seeks approval. It has its place. It helps us navigate social life, but when we confuse the mask for the person, we become estranged from our own essence. Think of the employee who performs excellence yet feels meaningless at their desk, or the parent who fulfills every responsibility but secretly longs for something unnamed, or the student who achieves every milestone yet feels increasingly lost. These are not failures of effort. They are symptoms of a deeper fracture, the split between how we live and who we truly are. Jung warned that society's emphasis on utility, conformity, and measurable outcomes pushes the soul into exile. We stop asking real questions. Instead, we trade depth for distraction and truth for comfort. But the soul cannot be silenced forever. It begins to resist, not through words, but through symptoms. Fatigue, anxiety, apathy, the dull ache of a life unaligned. These are not weaknesses, they are messages. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, Jung wrote. And yet that is precisely the work the soul demands. Not self-improvement, but self-reclamation. We are not here to endlessly upgrade ourselves like machines. We are here to remember, to reconnect with the parts of us that we were taught to hide: our sensitivity, our curiosity, our wounds, our wonder. This is why so many people feel lost, because they have been navigating life with a map that leads away from the self. They were told to follow goals instead of instincts, trends instead of truth. But when the soul grows tired of the pretense, it withdraws its energy. It refuses to animate what is false. And that is what we call burnout, not mere exhaustion, but the refusal of your inner life to continue living a lie. Jung believed that this crisis, this moment of soul withdrawal, is not an end, but a beginning, a sacred rupture. It is the psyche's way of saying, this is not your path. It is an invitation to turn inward, to stop running, to become still enough to hear what the noise has drowned out. This stillness is not empty. It is the threshold, the place where the true journey begins. And that journey, Jung taught, is not toward perfection, but wholeness. Not to fit the mold, but to break it so that the authentic self might emerge like a pearl hidden deep within the unconscious. The process will not flatter the ego. It will likely unsettle you, but it will also awaken you. The world may continue to demand performance, but you don't have to participate in the lie. In fact, the very act of stepping back, of reclaiming your time, your truth, your soul, is the most radical and necessary act of our time. Because in a society that thrives on the suppression of the inner life, to choose self-awareness is to rebel, and to heal is to revolt. So if you're here lost, or tired, or simply unsure, good, you are not alone. You are not broken. You are standing at the beginning of something real, and the journey ahead is not about becoming someone else. It's about unbecoming everything you were never meant to be. Stay with me, because in the next part, we'll explore what it means to confront the shadow and how doing so might restore the pieces of yourself you didn't even know were missing. If the first fracture in the modern soul begins with the mask, the persona, then the second rupture begins with what lies beneath it, the shadow. Carl Jung taught that each of us carries a shadow, not as a symbol of evil, but as a necessary dimension of the psyche. The shadow contains all the parts of ourselves we've been taught to reject: our anger, our sadness, our impulses, our fears, and even our longings. It holds not only our wounds, but also our creative potential. And yet in our effort to be accepted, praised, or simply left alone, we bury these parts. From an early age, we learn which emotions are safe to express and which ones get us scolded, shamed, or ignored. We learn that being angry makes us difficult, that expressing sadness makes us weak, and that being too curious or too dreamy is unrealistic. So we disown these aspects, we exile them to the unconscious, not because they are dangerous, but because we fear they will make us unlovable. But what is repressed is not erased. The shadow doesn't disappear, it lingers, it grows, and if not brought into consciousness, it will find other ways to emerge, often in distorted or disruptive forms. Jung warned that, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. You may lash out at loved ones, sabotage your own success, feel inexplicable anxiety, or find yourself stuck in repeating patterns, not realizing that these are your own shadow elements trying to get your attention. Let's be clear, the shadow is not a villain. It is a messenger. It speaks the language of dreams, projections, triggers, and emotional reactions. Every time you judge someone harshly for something you secretly fear in yourself, your shadow is at work. Every time you shrink from conflict, but feel rage simmering under the surface, your shadow is speaking. And every time you chase perfection, but feel hollow when you reach it, that's the shadow revealing that what you seek isn't applause, but authenticity. Integrating the shadow is not about indulging destructive behaviors. It's about understanding them. It's about recognizing that your frustration, your jealousy, your fear, they are not moral failures. They are signals. The psyche is asking you to look inward, not to punish yourself, but to reclaim what you've abandoned. And here's the paradox. Inside your shadow are not only the parts of yourself that hurt, but the parts of yourself that heal. Buried beneath shame may be your courage. Hidden beneath fear may be your intuition. Suppressed along with your anger may be your capacity to set boundaries, to speak up, to protect yourself. Integration is not annihilation. It is wholeness. But integration demands honesty. Not performative vulnerability, but radical inner truth. It asks us to confront our envy, our need for control, our deep-seated fears of inadequacy. It demands that we face not only what has been done to us, but what we have done in response. The shadow is not just pain, it's power unrealized. Jung did not promise that this work would be easy. In fact, he described it as the night sea journey, a descent into the unconscious, where we must face inner monsters, not to slay them, but to understand what they guard. Often they protect the most tender parts of us, the child who wasn't heard, the artist who wasn't supported, the lover who was never safe to feel. The shadow carries all of it. And when we listen, we don't become darker, we become deeper. In our culture, shadow work is sometimes romanticized as a trend, but it is not a hashtag. It is not something you check off on a to-do list between yoga and journaling. It is a lifelong practice, a conversation between your conscious self and your unconscious material. And the reward isn't perfection, it's peace. A kind of inner stillness that can only come when all parts of you are allowed to exist without shame. You might wonder, where do I begin? Start by noticing what triggers you, who irritates you, and why. What behaviors do you despise in others, and could they mirror something unresolved in you? What dreams keep returning, and what emotions keep recurring? These are clues. Shadow work begins not with judgment, but with curiosity. The truth is, we cannot become whole by editing ourselves down to what is socially acceptable. We cannot become real by denying what is raw, and we cannot grow by pretending we have no darkness. The goal is not to eliminate the shadow, but to bring it into the light. To allow it to become a dialogue partner in your journey toward becoming your full self. So if you're feeling the weight of emotions you've tried to outrun, don't fear them. They may be the very doorway to your healing. The shadow you've tried to avoid might be holding the piece of you you've been searching for all along. Stay with me, because in the next section, we'll explore how burnout and exhaustion are not failures of willpower, but sacred refusals of the soul to participate in a life misaligned with truth, and how listening to that fatigue can be the first real act of self-respect you've ever made. What if your exhaustion isn't a weakness, but wisdom? What if your burnout, the kind that no amount of sleep, caffeine, or motivation hacks can fix, is not a flaw in your biology, but a rupture in your being? Carl Jung saw fatigue not merely as physical depletion, but often as a deeper signal from the unconscious. He understood that when the psyche can no longer endure the life we're forcing it to live, it begins to rebel, not with violence, but with silence, with apathy, with a haunting numbness that whispers, "This isn't it." In a culture that rewards output over insight and speed over sincerity, many of us are applauded for suppressing our inner world. We are praised for showing up while emotionally absent, for pushing through pain without question, and for calling disconnection discipline. The system tells us to be grateful for being busy, but the soul, Jung would say, keeps a different score. It doesn't measure worth in checklists. It measures integrity alignment between our inner truth and our outer lives. When that alignment breaks down, the soul withdraws its energy. This is what Jung referred to as loss of libido, not in the narrow sexual sense, but as the symbolic life force psychic energy that gives vitality, curiosity, and engagement. When this energy vanishes, we call it burnout. But it is far more than mere fatigue. It is your deeper self refusing to animate a role that no longer feels authentic. Think about the moments you feel drained just by anticipating your day. The projects you once pursued with passion now feel like burdens. Even small talk becomes unbearable. This is not laziness. It's your psyche saying, I no longer recognize myself in this story. We've been trained to respond by pushing harder, caffeinating the soul, so to speak. But that's like turning up the music in a car that's breaking down just to drown out the noise. It doesn't heal the engine. It only delays the breakdown. Jung believed that symptoms like burnout are not failures to be fixed, but invitations to be examined. They are the unconscious pulling the emergency brake. The psyche is trying to prevent you from going further down a path that denies your truth. And in that sense, your burnout is not a sign that you've collapsed. It's a sign that you've awakened, even if only partially, to the falseness of the life you're performing. But awakening can be terrifying. It dismantles your carefully built identity. You may begin to question everything: your job, your relationships, your goals, and it can feel like falling apart. Yet Jung would argue falling apart is often the beginning of falling into yourself. The false scaffolding must collapse before something authentic can emerge. In this pause, this liminal space between what was and what wants to be, you may feel lost. But as Jung reminds us, we cannot live the afternoon of life according to the program of life's morning. What once worked achievement, approval, avoidance no longer satisfies. The soul demands something deeper, something real. So how do we respond? First, by listening, by refusing to numb or explain away the discomfort. Sit with it. Ask it what it's trying to protect. Burnout often guards a dream you abandoned to survive, a boundary you never set, a truth you silenced in order to belong. Begin by honoring that voice. It does not need you to fix it. It needs you to acknowledge it. Then, begin to reclaim space. Emotional space, mental space, spiritual space. You don't have to move to the mountains or quit everything overnight, but you do have to begin saying no to what drains you and yes to what restores you, even if the yes is as simple as taking 10 minutes to breathe without a screen. Rest, Jung would say, is not indulgent. It is revolutionary in a system that commodifies your attention and exploits your energy. This is not about abandoning responsibility. It's about redefining it. Your first responsibility is to your own soul. To live in alignment with your inner truth is not selfish. It is the only way to live without poisoning yourself and those around you. Because unhealed burnout doesn't just make you tired, it makes you resentful, reactive, hollow. Jung wrote that modern man suffers from the loss of myth, the loss of meaning of a narrative that connects us to something greater. Burnout is the result of living someone else's story, chasing metrics that mean nothing to your inner world. To heal, you must write your own myth. One where the plot isn't productivity, but presence. Not perfection, but participation in your own truth. And so if you're tired, truly tired, not from doing too much, but from doing what doesn't align, you are not broken. You are being called back to yourself. Honor that call. Because the deeper you descend into what feels like failure, the closer you may be to finding what never failed you, your own soul patiently waiting for you to return. Stay with me, because in the next section, we'll explore the path of individuation, Jung's great psychological journey of becoming whole, and how it holds the key to reclaiming your life from the inside out. There comes a moment after the mask has cracked, after the shadow has stirred, and after the soul has refused to continue playing a false role, when you are left in a strange and sacred space, the in-between. The outer world may still demand your performance, but inwardly, you can no longer comply. This is where Carl Jung introduces one of his most profound psychological ideas, individuation, the journey of becoming who you truly are. Individuation is not self-improvement. It's not about fixing flaws or adding skills. It's about reclaiming what is already yours, but forgotten, buried, or rejected. It is the process by which a person integrates the fragmented pieces of their psyche, conscious and unconscious light, and shadow persona, and soul, into a coherent whole. Jung called this the central task of human life, not to become someone else, but to return to the self. The self in Jungian terms is not the ego. It is a larger, wiser center of the psyche. The ego is who you think you are. The self is who you are. It is the container of your essence, the part of you that existed before the world told you who to be. And to reach this self, we must walk through the wilderness of our own psyche. Individuation begins when we stop living from borrowed identities. It begins when we notice how much of our energy goes into maintaining a persona that no longer fits. It begins when we dare to question, is this my dream or someone else's? Do I even recognize the person I've become? These aren't midlife questions, they are eternal questions, and they surface any time the soul is ready to evolve. The path is not linear. You may revisit your shadow again and again. You may grieve identities you outgrow. You may feel disoriented, especially when the old coping mechanisms no longer work and the new ways haven't revealed themselves. But this is not failure. This is transition. This is transformation from the inside out. Jung described individuation as a spiral. You don't move in a straight line, but circle deeper with each turn. At each stage, you uncover forgotten truths, desires you silenced to be accepted, dreams you postponed in the name of duty, talents you dismissed as impractical. You may rediscover your creativity, your intuition, your voice. And slowly, the pieces of your inner life begin to connect. But this connection doesn't mean perfection. It means authenticity. You stop chasing roles. You begin living from your center. You no longer perform wholeness. You embody it even in your imperfection. You begin to feel more aligned, more honest, more alive. This is the quiet joy of becoming whole, not because you are flawless, but because you are finally real. In practical terms, individuation may look like setting boundaries where you used to people please. It may mean pursuing a path that doesn't guarantee applause, but aligns with your truth. It may mean grieving the years you lived for others and forgiving yourself for not knowing better. These small acts of courage are not selfish. They are sacred. And here's what Jung understood with profound clarity: you cannot individuate in isolation. Though the path is deeply personal, it is not meant to be walked alone. We discover who we are not just by introspection, but through relationship. True connection with others who honor your process not pressure your persona, is essential. Because individuation is not withdrawal from the world. It is engagement with it from a place of truth. This work reshapes not just your inner life, but your outer world. As you become more whole, your relationships shift. You stop settling for surface conversations. You hunger for depth, honesty, resonance. You become less interested in performing and more interested in presence. You stop fearing solitude and start cherishing it. You create space not just for healing, but for meaning. And meaning is what this journey ultimately returns us to. Jung believed that without meaning we suffer not because life is hard, but because it feels empty. Individuation is the way back to meaning. Not a meaning handed to you by society, but one that arises from the depths of your being. It's the quiet clarity that says, I know who I am now. I may not have all the answers, but I'm no longer living a lie. So if you've come this far through the collapse of the persona, the confrontation with the shadow, and the awakening through burnout, know this, you are not lost. You are emerging. You are in the process of coming home to yourself. The journey is not quick. It is not glamorous, but it is sacred. And as Jung wrote, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not the edited version, not the performing version, but the version that whispers to you in quiet moments, the one that has always been there, waiting to be remembered. Stay with me, because in the final part, we'll talk about how to live this new truth in a world that still demands your mask, and how your personal healing is, in fact, a quiet revolution that invites others to remember who they are too. If you've journeyed with me through this video, through the crumbling of the persona, the confrontation with your shadow, the silent protest of burnout, and the sacred spiral of individuation, then you've already taken the first step towards something rare and real, the reclamation of your soul. Carl Jung did not promise comfort. He promised truth. And the truth is, most people spend their lives asleep in someone else's dream. They wear masks so well they forget their own face. They silence the very parts of themselves that could set them free. But you who feel lost, exhausted, uncertain, may be closer to awakening than you know. Because to feel lost in a world built on illusion is not failure. It is clarity. The world will still try to lure you back into performance, into pleasing, into proving. But now, you've seen behind the curtain. You know that your worth isn't measured in likes or labor. You know that burnout is not weakness, but a refusal to live a lie. You know that your shadow is not your enemy, but your guide. And you know perhaps for the first time that the self you long for has never truly left. It has been waiting quietly for your return. Living from this truth is not easy. It requires courage. It requires solitude. It requires you to disappoint others in order to stop betraying yourself. But it also gives you something no external achievement ever could meaning. Not manufactured meaning, but authentic, grounded, soulful meaning. The kind that roots you when life storms. The kind that makes you feel alive without performing. This is not the end. It is the beginning of a life lived from within rather than from the expectations that surround you. And if you choose to keep going through reflection, through rest, through radical honesty, what you'll discover is not some perfect version of yourself, but a whole one. Messy, beautiful, contradictory, and deeply human. Jung believed that the most rebellious act in a soulless society is to remember your humanity. So I leave you with this invitation: live more slowly, love more honestly, speak more truthfully, And never forget, your life was never meant to be a performance. It was meant to be a homecoming. If this video stirred something in you, if you felt seen, understood, or simply a little less alone, leave a comment below. Tell me what part of yourself are you ready to reclaim. I read every one of them, and I'd love to hear your story. And if you want more content that speaks to the soul, not just the scroll, subscribe to my channel. Because here, we don't chase algorithms. We follow meaning. Thank you for being here. Truly.